Good morning and welcome back to our news update coming to you live from Warsaw. I'm Jastrzębska. Israel continues to strike the Lebanese capital Beirut, where 3 people have been killed and 6 others wounded in attacks just within the past few hours. Meanwhile, Iran launched several missiles toward Israel in the early hours of Thursday morning. No casualties have been reported so far. Explosions were reported in Tehran shortly before 5 a.m. local time. Videos circulating online show plumes of smoke and large explosions rocking the city. Meanwhile, officials in Saudi Arabia said they intercepted 3 cruise missiles outside the city of Al-Harj. A drone was shot down near the Erbil airport in Iraq, causing damage to nearby buildings. The British Maritime Security Agency reports that a tanker off the coast of Kuwait has also been hit. According to the UN's International Maritime Organization, around 20,000 people are trapped due to events in the Strait of Hormuz. In response to Iran's threats to attack ships, US President Donald Trump said the US Navy will protect tankers if necessary. A bipartisan resolution aimed at limiting U.S. President Donald Trump's ability to wage war in Iran has failed in the U.S. Senate as military strikes continue. The war powers measure was rejected 53-47, largely along party lines. It would have required congressional approval for further U.S. military action.
Why is Donald Trump hell-bent on making history repeat itself? Why is he plunging America headfirst into a war that Americans do not want and which he cannot even explain? Enough is enough. The American people deserve a say, and that is what our resolution is about. We must act to stop Trump's belligerence.
45 of the last 47 presidents, which is all we've had, have ordered kinetic acts, just like President Trump has done, without going to Congress. This isn't new. This has happened 45 in the last 47 presidencies.
The declaration of war is not a power that the President of the United States has. The Constitution makes it clear the declaration of war is the authority and the responsibility of Congress. Presidents of both parties, yes, they have engaged in military operations, but the declaration of war belongs to this body.
President Trump decided to attack Iran. That decision was profound, deliberate, and correct. The president understands the weight of war. He was clear-eyed about the risk, and he was honest with the American people.
Help is on the way for those stranded in the Gulf region. 2 Polish Air Force planes are on their way to assist in evacuating Polish citizens. People with medical needs are receiving top priority.
Operations are beginning under the Polish Armed Forces Middle Eastern contingent. Aircraft of the Polish Air Force have taken off from Poland to support operations related to the evacuation of citizens of the Republic of Poland from the broader Middle East. The Polish Armed Forces stand ready to provide assistance to Polish citizens wherever the need arises.
Poland's president has announced he is working on what he calls a sovereign alternative to the EU's Safe Loan program in cooperation with the country's central bank. Karol Nawrocki says the initiative would secure similar resources for military spending, but using Poland's own funds, potentially including gold reserves and other financing sources.
We have come up with a secure and sovereign alternative to the SAFE program, one with no financial strings attached. I like to call it zero-interest SAFE. It would be made possible thanks to Polish investments and gold reserves. I met with the head of the National Bank of Poland to discuss this. This project would secure over 40 billion euro, free of any interest, and certainly not tied to a decades-long loan. The funds would not be affected by changes within the EU. It would also offer freedom when it comes to picking where the Polish army gets its equipment from, be it from the EU or anywhere else in the world. The National Bank of Poland is ready to launch this program right now, in accordance with Polish law. However, my office is ready to push for legislation changes to facilitate the program, if need be. The There are certain challenges we face, but our starting point is well within Polish law, international law, and the rules of the European central banking system. But we do want to expand on this, and there will be opportunities for us to do so, provided we develop a solid cooperation with the Polish government.
Tensions are rising between the United States and Spain after Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez accused President Donald Trump of taking illegal action against Iran. Speaking on Wednesday, Sánchez warned, "You cannot respond to one illegality with another, because that is how humanity's greatest catastrophes begin."
Tensions are rising between Washington and Europe after U.S. President Donald Trump threatened to sever trade relations with Spain. The threats came after Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez refused to let U.S. forces to launch their attacks on Iran from Spanish military bases and described the joint U.S. and Israeli operation as illegal. Speaking on Tuesday alongside German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, the U.S. president said he had instructed officials to sever ties with Madrid.
Spain has been terrible. In fact, I told Scott to cut off all dealings with Spain.
Merz had stayed largely silent during Trump's remarks, drawing stark criticism from Spain's Foreign Minister Alvarez, who had questioned whether Berlin had shown enough solidarity. The European Commission, however, has declared their full support.
I want to be very clear. In commercial matters, any commercial threat directed at a member state is by definition a threat against the European Union.
While Spain has secured firm backing from Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and French President Emmanuel Macron, others find themselves in a more precarious position. Donald Trump also targeted British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, criticizing his initial refusal to allow US strikes on Iran to launch from UK bases. Though London later approved US operations for what it called defensive actions, Donald Trump has remained displeased. For TVP World from Brussels, Laura Khazanov.
Volodymyr Zelensky says Ukraine is helping partners defend against Shahid drones, adding, "We help those who help Ukraine move closer to a just end to this war." Russia has used the Iranian-made drones in near-daily attacks since late 2022.
Partners are turning to us, to Ukraine, asking for help in defending against Shahid drones, given our expertise and real operational experience. There have also been requests from the American side. In recent days, I've spoken with the leaders of the UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, Jordan and Kuwait. There will also be negotiations with other regional leaders. We are coordinating with our European partners as well. Of course, any assistance we provide will only be on the condition that it does not weaken our own defence in Ukraine and that it serves as an investment in our diplomatic opportunities. We help those who help us, Ukraine, move closer to a just end to this war. We help them defend themselves.
Norway's Foreign Minister Espen Barth Eide says the terms of a fair settlement for Ukraine must be defined before the war with Russia ends. In an interview with TVP World, he warned that the outcome will shape Europe's post-war security and said the continent must avoid repeating the mistakes of the World War II.
I think that cannot be said enough. The way a post-war era looks is defined at the end of the war, not after the war. Sadly, Poland knows that because Poland lived for 40 years in the aftermath of Yalta and the division of Europe. So don't take lightly on what's happening when a war ends. We need to make sure that there is no new Yalta agreement in Europe, that every democratic, freedom-loving country that would like to are allowed to join Western institutions, and that nobody else, read Mr. Putin, is allowed to block them from doing so. Now that's important for Polish and Norwegian security and from all of us.
Slovakia is no longer supplying Ukraine with emergency power supplies. Prime Minister Robert Fico has announced. The decision comes in response to the closure of the Druzhba pipeline, which provided Slovakia with Russian oil.
More than a month after the Druzhba pipeline stopped processing Russian oil to Hungary and Slovakia, that country's Prime Minister Robert Fico is making good on his threats. A week ago, he said he'd refuse requests for emergency electricity from Ukraine. Today, he announced that supply is fully terminated.
The contract is definitely being terminated because from the moment we announced it last week, nothing went to Ukraine in terms of emergency supplies.
Ukraine continues to face a chronic electricity shortage as Russia attacks its cities and power stations. It denies stopping the flow of oil, saying Russian military action is to blame. And that's not all. Fico says he may join Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban in blocking a €90 billion military spending loan for Ukraine.
This is the first step, and we are going to consider what will happen next. President Zelensky will push us so hard that we will join Hungary in blocking the €90 billion loan. Well, go ahead, President Zelensky. Test our patience.
If you're a veto power in the EU and you're yourself constantly threatened with sanctions, with withdrawal of resources, you need to have one ally you can always rely on. Fico is not quite committed to that to the fullest, because why would he be? But he's happy to play along with that idea.
In the meantime, Orban is looking for new ways to access Russian oil. His foreign minister Peter Szijjártó is in Moscow, where he's met Russian President Vladimir Putin. 2 ethnic Hungarian-Ukrainian soldiers captured by the Russians will be handed over to Szijjártó. While it has not blamed Ukraine for damaging the Druzhba pipeline, the European Commission has requested access to it to verify and assess the damage. For TVP World, Andrew Sweeney.
The economic fallout from the conflict in the Middle East is already being felt. The escalation has rattled global markets, pushing energy prices much higher. And for Europe, rising gas costs are threatening to drive up prices across the economy.
From crude oil to currencies, the war in the Middle East is shaking up global markets. Energy prices have soared as the near-total shutdown of maritime traffic through the Strait of Hormuz has cut off 20% of the world's oil and gas supply.
The Strait of Hormuz is probably the most important energy choke point in the global energy system. Roughly 20 million barrels of oil per day pass through the strait.
While most of that fuel, over 80%, flows to ports in Asia, Europe has been hit by surging prices, particularly for natural gas.
Europe is still exposed indirectly through global LNG markets. So if shipments from Qatar were disrupted, Asian buyers would compete for alternative cargo, tightening the global market and pushing gas prices higher worldwide, including Europe, of course.
Prices soared further on Tuesday after Qatar, a major liquefied natural gas exporter, halted production at the world's biggest LNG export facility. In the foreign exchange market, investors have parked their money in safe haven currencies like the US dollar.
Even in a circumstance like that, is the US being an attacker and involved in a war, a lot of cash is going to be moving from Europe to the United States and treating the US dollar as a safe haven.
On the other hand, emerging market currencies like the Polish zloty, perceived by investors as being riskier, have tumbled. The zloty's recent tumble and rising energy prices, factors largely outside the influence of central bank policymakers, didn't stop the National Bank of Poland from lowering interest rates on Wednesday.
It's not a monetary phenomenon, so the monetary policy does not have any possibility to react to energy shocks.
With its profound impact on the global economy, the war in the Middle East has injected a new source of tension into markets. Maciej Wilowski for TVP World.
And that's a wrap for now. I'll be back with the latest at the top of the hour. Coming up next, World Talks.